Now that you have Minitab open, let's begin our exercise, Measures of Central Tendency. We're at the session window now, but let's migrate over to a worksheet. So if I click on the big blue eye, I can go over to the Worksheets folder, and we have our worksheet. Let's enter in a field name, and let's just call it Data. So type in Data as the heading for the C1 column. Now let's enter the data that you've been provided, and that would be, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 3, 6, 10, 11, and 120. Now when you typed in that 120, you were probably thinking to yourself, boy, this doesn't seem to be part of this group of data. Well, that might be your initial reaction. But the data is the data that we received from a qualified source. So let's take a look at our measures of central tendency. To calculate those measures, we're going to use the Statistics pull-down menu. So click on the Stat pull-down menu. We're going to select Basic Statistics, and we're going to display Descriptive Statistics. The variable that we're going to look at is our data. Now, when we highlight the data, we could double click on it and it will go to the variables box, or we can push the select button. If it's a single entry, double clicking is the best way. If you have multiple entries that you want to select, you do need to highlight them and use the select button. The statistics that we will be looking at, we want to calculate the mean, which is the average value. We'd like to look at the median, which is the midpoint, and we'd also like to take a look at the mode, which is the most frequently occurring value in our data set. And now let's press OK. From a graph standpoint, why don't we take a look at a histogram of the data? And let's say OK. And now let's run our analysis here and press OK. So if we want to view our graph, we can click on that, go to the big blue eye, move next to it to Show Graphs folder. We'll click on that, and there's our graph. So the histogram is showing us that our data looks a bit skewed. We have a cluster of data in the 0 to 20 range, and then way out here we have something at 120. So our distribution would be very, very skewed. Let's take a look at the session window to see what the statistics are for the measures of central tendency. So if I go up to the big blue eye, I can move over to the right to the scroll, which is the session window. I'll click on the session window, and here's our statistics. The data set had an average value of 14.15. The midpoint was 5, and the mode, most frequently occurring value, was 3, and it appeared 3 times in our data set. If we go back to our graph, what makes most sense? The average value, which is skewed more toward the 120, or the midpoint value, which is around 5. The midpoint probably makes more sense when you look at this data. This would be analogous to housing prices that you may see in a particular region, where there's a cluster of home prices in a reasonable price range, and then there's a few houses that are way out there, extremely expensive. So that's a skewed distribution. So once again, here's our measures of central tendency: the average value, which is the mean, the midpoint, the median, and the mode, the most frequently occurring value. And there you have our measures of central tendency in Minitab.